informed decisions about your health. So don't forget to join me here at 11 a.m. Thursday. It's news you can use from Ocala Health, Strive, and your friends here at WOCA.
Ocala's information station, 1370 WOCA.
Ocala.
All right, 5 minutes after 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. Let's see, I worked for the state a long time ago, and I worked for the Department of Juvenile Justice, or whatever it was called. And there was a guy who worked there, and he was really very good at what he did. I mean, he was really good with the kids, and he was always there when we would take the kids to court. And one time, he let one of the young guys go use the restroom, and the kid escaped out of the bathroom window, and the guy ended up getting fired from his job. And it's the biggest fear when you have a job that you're going to be fired, you know. You don't want to be fired, right? And I remember thinking to myself that this is a good employee. You know, the next employee you put in his place is going to make that same mistake, but he will never make that mistake again he made a mistake. You know, he let the boy go into the bathroom. He took the handcuffs off of him or whatever it was. And who knew the kid was going to climb out of a second-story window? And anyway, so he will never make that mistake again. Of course, he wouldn't have a chance because he was fired. But I mean, had he been left on the job? And so you have a job and you walk around in fear, and that's the motivating. In other words, they set the example. The powers that were in charge set the example for the rest of us. Don't you ever do this, because this will be you. You'll be the one, right? Right. And I remember thinking back to, I have a friend in New York who teaches dogs, and she was telling me one time that you don't teach with fear, you teach with love, or with rewarding good behavior, not punishing bad behavior. Joan Kingsley is on the phone. Some of this is in the book called The Fear-Free Organization, Vital Insights from Neuroscience to Transform Your Business Culture. She wrote the book. There are two other co-authors. Let me tell you who they are. Dr. Paul Brown and Dr. Sue Patterson. Joan told me off the air that she was not a doctor, even though I called her doctor because it seems like she should be. She's a consultant, clinical, and organizational psychotherapist, an honorary consultant psychotherapist at the National Hospital for Neurology and Neurosurgery, and she's on the psychotherapist register of the School of Life. She has a private practice in London, England. Wow, and she's a member of the New York Academy of Sciences and a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. Wow, you've got a lot of credentials. Yeah. And I spoke to her real briefly off the air. Joan Kingsley. Good morning, Joan.
Hi, good morning.
And where are you calling from right now?
I'm I'm in the Hamptons. I'm in a little village called Quogue. I live in London, but I'm obviously, as you can hear, American. My husband's British.
Yeah.
And summer every August we spend at the beach here.
Did you wait a minute? Was there a submarine stuck in the locks in the Hamptons, or was that a fake story I saw this morning?
I don't know. I haven't seen it. It's very possible. You probably know more than I do.
Just when you said the Hamptons, it rang a bell. Well, good morning. Thank you for being on the air with us. I've worked for both kinds of employers, the kind where you're kind of afraid, and that motivates you in some ways.
It does, but the short-term benefits are very good. The long-term benefits are terrible, both for people and for organizations, because you wind up losing people. You wind up losing, and that's a wonderful story you just told. We're so caught up in all of this political correctness. And, you need to give people a chance, and particularly good employees. You should be allowed to make mistakes. Can you imagine what our kids would be like if we didn't let them make mistakes?
Absolutely.
It's one of our great learning tools.
And when I looked through the book, I thought to myself, this is not just about businesses. This is about families, and this is about how even how I raise my dog.
Fear-free family, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Because the principles are the same whether you're in your family organization or your school or your college or your university or at work. It applies across the board throughout the lifespan.
But can I ask you this question? This is the question I have about this very subject. When we go to a job, we all bring with us whatever we grow up with. So an employer has to use whatever works best on you. I mean,
right.
How do you have
you didn't write this book for me?
But how do you have an across-the-board policy when everybody's got their own different things that push their buttons?
That is such a wonderful point. And one of the things we talk about in the Fear-Free organization is you, as a manager, I mean, the thing is that managers get promoted into their jobs because they're great at doing the work. They're productive. They produce to the bottom line, and suddenly, hey, you're running a department. Here's your team.
Right.
And I've seen many men and women, young men and women promoted up, come to see us and say, now what do? I don't know anything about people. So, it's really important to think of people not as chess pieces, which is what organizations tend to do. So you put in your job category title box. But in fact, behind each job description is a person doing that job, and everybody brings everything to work with them. Their history, what kind of morning they had, did their dog get sick, everything. And as a manager, it's very important to be sensitive to that and to pick up, to tune into what's going on, to be empathic. And that starts with knowing yourself, having insight about yourself.
And
go
ahead. And when a person is used to having hands-on in their particular field in the job, and then they're moved up to manager, they have to relinquish that hands-on to the people who they are managing.
It's called delegation.
Yes,
very
and
hard.
It's very difficult.
My kids tell me I'm a very controlling mom. I mean, they're older now, but I'm still controlling, and I'm controlling in the kitchen. And it's very hard to give that up when you're used to being in charge.
All right, so I knew a teacher in a bad neighborhood. I don't even know how to tell you the name of the neighborhood because I'm not familiar, but it was in Bridgeport, Connecticut, okay? And he said to me, because these kids are notoriously known for being bad, he said the way he does it is the very first day they ever meet him, the first day of school, he is the meanest guy they're ever going to meet. And then he becomes nicer, as opposed to being nice the first day, because he says you can never go, because the first day they get to see you mean.
Sorry.
That was his approach. I mean, would you agree with that or disagree?
I agree with that in terms of yelling and being loud and being aggressive is not always bullying, and it's not always bad behavior. So I know a lawyer in London, and he sits there yelling at everybody, and I went to have a meeting at his office, and they were all laughing at him because they're not afraid of him. They know what he's about. They know it's bluster. So it's what lies underneath, and kids certainly know when parents mean what they're yelling about, and kids understand when they're being loved, and so do we all. So, yes, you can dole out very tough messages on the first day of work. I call it boundary setting, making the rules clear, and that's really important. People go into new jobs and new organizations, and they want to know what's expected of them, what the rules are, what the behaviors are, what's going on in this culture. So, in a way, he was communicating that, and I'm probably not really being mean, just being tough and boundary setting.
Okay, so I guess I'm admitting something here, but I'm wondering if this will serve this conversation at all. As a man, I think it's harder to be rough on a woman. I don't mean rough in an abusive way. I mean, when you have somebody who answers to you, and she's done something, it's not quite right, you're kind of gentler than you would be with another guy. You would have said, "You stupid idiot, look what you did."
I know.
But you wouldn't do that to a woman. And I don't know, and I've had lady bosses too, and they've been super, the ones I've had. Of course, I've never really messed up that bad, but
you're a perfect person.
but I mean, do we approach that differently, or do we, again, the politically correct thing? Do we treat everybody the same?
Well, you can't treat everybody the same. It's not. It's like the idea of being subjective about everything. All of the neuroscientific research into the brain says there's no such thing as subjectivity. You can do, I think Harvard has little tests you can do online, and maybe MIT does as well. And you can see how you think you're not biased, but we all have internal biases that are in the non-conscious realm that we're not aware of, that affect how we treat people. And, the more you know that about yourself, the more you can get over that. The more you can be very giving and supportive to people. But you have to know what makes you tick before you know what makes other people tick.
Wow. Really very insightful.
And then, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
And then on the employee side, sometimes employees feel that if they keep making everybody feel sorry for them, that they're going to keep their job in that respect.
Playing the victim.
Yes, exactly.
And we do live in a victim culture, and that's part of political correctness. I think we haven't written about that, but that's another book to write. That's very important. But getting back to what you were saying about male and female, and male and female brains are built differently, and we respond differently, and clearly, physically, most women are not as strong as the strongest men. I'm sure there are one or two exceptions, but
right.
But then you go into financial service environments, and no one cares whether you're a man or a woman. You are going to get shot down in the same way. It is not gender specific, So some environments are quite brutal. Some people like working in those environments. If
Joan Kingsley, so I guess we have to take a little break, Joan. The book is called The Fear-Free Organization. After we come back, we'll have to dig a little deeper and find out who you wrote the book for and what the feedback has been from the folks who have actually used it or read it and used it. So we'll take a little break and be right back. Joan Kingsley, when we come back. The book, again, The Fear-Free Organization. We'll be right back.
The weather is brought to you by myfwc.com. Safe boating is no accident for today. Times of clouds and sun with a shower and thunderstorm around during the afternoon and evening hours. The high today 86 to 90. Then overnight partly cloudy, though 72 to 76. Tomorrow partly sunny with a couple of thunderstorms around during the afternoon and evening hours. High 88 to 92. And for Thursday, some sunshine with an afternoon thunderstorm. High 88 to 92. From the Florida Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Joe Lundberg.
If you're anything like I was, the thought of getting older was the last thing on your mind. But here we are. For me, it started slowly. The lack of energy, never being in the mood, and when I was, I could never perform at my best. I tried the pills and other treatments with minimal results, and all but given up on my sex life. Then, I found the doctors at New Male Medical Center. Wow, they made a new male out of me. Feel like I'm 25 again. I have renewed vigor, so much more energy, and no longer worry about my performance. New Male treated me like my situation was one of a kind, with a custom treatment plan that really works. I feel great. They can create one for you too. It does not matter if you suffer from low testosterone, erectile dysfunction, or just want to last longer. New Male will help you.
Call New Male Medical Center today at 352-404-4779. 352-404-4779. That's 352-404-4779. It will change your life. 352-404-4779.
One of the most common questions those nearing retirement are asking: will I outlive my money? Retirement questions like these and many more will be answered every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. on Planning for a Better and Safer Retirement with hosts Francois and Julian Cozenet. Francois and Julian will help you put your retirement puzzle together. Catch Planning for a Better and Safer Retirement Saturdays at 9 a.m. on Ocala's News Talk, The Source 96.3 FM and 1370 AM.
Here's what you may have missed on the John Tesh Radio Show.
When we buy a vacation, we're also buying a story. So even if the happiness bump from a vacation is long over, when we retell the story of how a pickpocket took our phone in Cabo, we get a happiness boost. Because with every sunburn, we're speeding up the skin aging process. When we skip the burns and apply sunscreen every day, we slow skin aging by up to 25%. Research shows that our biggest diet mistake is usually alcohol.
Intelligence for your life on the John Tesh Radio Show. Don't miss this stuff.
All right, 20 minutes after 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. We are talking about a pretty interesting subject, and I think my son probably could have used this book. Maybe he's past this point by now. Joan Kingsley is our guest. I'll explain to Joan and everybody else what I'm talking about with that reference to my son. The book is called The Fear-Free Organization, Vital Insights from Neuroscience to Transform Your Business Culture. Joan wrote the book with Drs. Paul Brown and Sue Patterson. Joan, I have a real quick story to tell you about my son. He, I'll brag about him a little bit. He's very smart. Mm-hmm. He got into some job where it's all about computers, and he quickly climbed the ranks and loved what he was doing. And there's something creative about his talents and his skills. And because it's computers, and because I'm 60, I'm kind of unsure what he does, to be honest with you. But what happened, I went over to his house one day, and I said, "How's the job?" And he said, "Nah, I was promoted, and now I'm not doing what I was doing. I'm overseeing everybody, and I hate it." I said, "Oh man, you hate it? I don't like hearing that you hate it." But he was in that place that you were talking about in the first half, where he was now supervising people instead of doing the creative part.
Very interesting.
I think he's now gotten past that, though. So is the book for him? Or would it have been for him?
That's exactly who the book is for. It is for managers and leaders. That's what we've focused it on. So it's not this is what you do when you're afraid, although, that's in the book as well. We want managers and leaders. This is very important in driving the book forward, to understand the impact of bullying and fear tactics on the people who are working for you. Now, people use fear because it is the easiest of all the emotions to trigger. It is the most ancient emotion in the brain. It comes out of the reptilian brain, and it is a very powerful and important emotion and the easiest to trigger. So people tend to go to that emotion instinctively because they want people to pay attention and to do what they're told. And what we want people to understand is when you use fear, this is what's happening in another person's brain. You are going into these two little things, almond-shaped things in the brain called the amygdala. The amygdala store emotional memories, and particularly fear-based memories. This is all based on neuroscientific research. I'm not making this up. And the amygdala releases neurochemicals in the brain throughout the body, and your body goes into survival mode. So instead of thriving, you're surviving. And that is very bad business strategy. But, people use fear and they don't understand what they're doing to another person. Although if you start talking to somebody about their pet, about their dog, absolutely understand. If you have a pet and you love the pet, you get love back. If you scare the pet becomes, in the worst case scenario, dangerous.
Yeah.
And we all have mammalian brains, so across species, it's the same.
So how do we use this for the drill sergeant, or as opposed to the bank manager? I mean, can you imagine the drill sergeant mentality in a bank manager's position?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think again, I'll go back to what I was saying before. If the drill sergeant, if you're in the Army, you know that your drill sergeant is trustworthy and safe, and the ones who aren't and who are truly frightening people get found out and get called on the carpet. But you want to be in the Army, or if I go to a surgeon, I want to know they're in charge. And so it's about how you communicate within the culture you work in, whether it's the Army or a surgery or a bank. And there's a different kind of language that gets used in those different cultures. But if you're in the Army, you expect that. You don't expect somebody to be touchy-feely when they're running drills.
How hard is it to change, though? If somebody's been had a management style and they recognize themselves in this book and they don't like what they see, and they say to themselves, okay, I need to change. How hard is that? Is that the first step? I'm guessing that's the first step, to be able to recognize it.
Not only is that the first step, it's 98% of the work. Because when you can recognize what you are doing and you're willing to make the changes follow. It's not that difficult. But you have to acknowledge that you have a problem. And you have to be willing to make those changes, and you have to ask for help, whether you're reading books or you're going to, a coach, whatever it is you're going to do. But if you are sitting there being defensive and thinking it's okay, you're never going to change. So the biggest step is saying, I need help, I have a problem, I recognize myself, and then you can start working on, changing yourself.
Are the attitudes of people who are the bosses, are they different in the boss that owns the business as opposed to bosses that are managers for a publicly traded company with stock where no one really owns?
Yes, that's such an interesting question. My husband runs his own business. He's an entrepreneur. He's very successful. Philip Kingsley, he makes hair products. He's known throughout the world. He runs a fear-free organization. And people have worked for him for many, many, many years. And it's the kind of organization he wants to run. And if somebody is toxic in the environment, not that he likes to fire people, and he very rarely will fire somebody, but he, will make it clear that it's unacceptable, and maybe they better think about working.
Or maybe they get fired. See, that's the way I look at Donald Trump. I look at Donald. I don't look at him as a mean guy. I mean, he always has that mean face, but I actually don't. I actually look at him as almost like a father figure. Who will fire you?
Well, yes, and the answer to your question is there's a big difference between organizations where you're having to answer to your stakeholders and entrepreneurial organizations. So that's a big question. I don't have a quick answer for that. But I think what happens in some big organizations, and let's think about NASA. I don't want to mention companies here, but let's think about NASA and the Challenger shuttle disaster. That was because in that organization, people knew there was something wrong with the O-ring, but they were afraid to tell their managers, their bosses, their leaders about it because they feared they would get fired for revealing that there was something that was wrong and would cost a lot of time and money to fix.
Wow.
And we all know these stories in other organizations. I will not mention them, but you read the newspapers. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
When you get cover-ups and whistleblowers get punished. I mean, in the National Health in England, there is the Staffordshire Hospital, and they killed in that hospital 1,500 people, and finally a whistleblower would not be quiet. And she got run out of town by, the local council, government, unions, because they didn't want to make any changes.
Wow, that's important. That's an important thing that you're saying right there. What I see in what you're saying is that if we continue to run organizations with the heavy fist so that everybody's afraid of us, ultimately it's going to hurt us.
It is, and that's my point. People say to me in interviews, what's the worst thing that can happen in a fear-driven organization? And I say the worst thing that can happen is the organization winds up killing people. That's the worst thing.
Yeah,
and
wow.
Happen. Yeah.
What a great conversation, and it went so fast. That's always my litmus test if it's a good one. When I look at the clock and I realize we're done and I don't want it to be done.
Thank you.
Joan, thank you for being on the air with us. I get a kick out of the fact that you said I could tell you were American from your accent. The Fear-Free Organization. I have a copy of the book right here. Call me if you want the copy that was sent to us. The rest of us have to go buy one. Do you have a website, Joan?
We don't. We've been so busy writing the book that we are in the process of somebody's building a website for us. So that'll be up and running in a couple of months.
So just go to the bookstore or the websites that sell books like Amazon and Barnes & Noble, etc.?
Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Amazon, I think, is out of stock at the moment, but they're going to be back in stock soon. But I know Barnes & Noble is in stock.
Okay. The Fear-Free Organization is what you would look up if you are going online. Joan Kingsley, thank you so much for being on the air with us today. Enjoy the Hamptons.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I will.
All right, we'll be right back.
Fox News Radio, I'm Lillian Wu. The final penalty phase getting underway in the Colorado theater shooting case.
15 relatives of the 12 people killed in the massacre are on the list to testify.